Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I ended up at this boarding school in Pennsylvania because regular high school just wasn't working for me. I had some learning disabilities and mental health stuff that my homeschool couldn't handle properly. It wasn't anything criminal or anything like that, just needed a different kind of support system. So my parents found this place that specialized in helping kids like me get through their last few years of high school. Most of the staff there were pretty understanding about why we were all there. They got that we needed structure, but also some patience while we figured things out. But there was this one dorm monitor who was absolutely horrible. Let's call him the jerk because that's what we all called him behind his back. This guy was on some kind of power trip. Anytime he was on duty, you knew it was going to be a bad day. He would put you on campus restriction for the tiniest things. Like if you forgot to make your bed perfectly, or if you were 2 minutes late coming back from the bathroom, boom, grounded to campus for the weekend. And if you dared to complain about his ridiculous punishments, he'd put you on site restriction, which meant you couldn't even hide in your room to do homework. You had to stay in common areas where he could watch you until bedtime. The guy just loved having control over a bunch of teenagers who couldn't really fight back. We all hated him, but what could we do? Complaining just made things worse for whoever spoke up. Right after Thanksgiving break that year, something happened that changed everything. The jerk got some bad news from home. Apparently, a family member on the West Coast was really sick, and he had to go take care of them for about 6 weeks. We didn't get all the details, but it sounded serious. Here's where it gets interesting. This guy lived in a pretty rough neighborhood and didn't trust leaving his car parked there while he was gone for over a month. So he went to the school administrators and asked if he could leave his car on campus while he was away. The administration said yes, but with one condition: he had to leave the keys with the maintenance department so they could move the car if they needed to plow the parking areas. The second week of December, he parked his car on the grass around the side of our dorm building and took off. He wouldn't be back until the end of January. Now, you have to understand something about this school. Because it was full of teenagers who sometimes made poor choices, they had taken the regular handles off all the outdoor water spigots. Instead, you needed this weird square key that was kept in the office, and you were only supposed to use it with permission from a dorm monitor. But here's the thing: a pair of flat-ended pliers worked just as well to turn the water on. A few of us were hanging out about a week after the jerk left, and we started talking about his car just sitting there. Someone mentioned how the spigot was right next to where he parked. Then someone else mentioned the pliers thing. And that's when we got the idea. The bedroom closest to where he parked his car was right next to that spigot. The kid who was supposed to be sleeping in that room was cool with crashing elsewhere, so he wouldn't get woken up all the time. We hid a garden hose in his room. Our plan was simple but required dedication. Every day from the time we got back from classes until we had to leave the next morning, someone would sneak into that room, unroll the hose, connect it to the spigot with the pliers, and give his car a nice thorough misting. Then they'd roll everything back up and hide it again. We set up a rotation so everyone got a turn. Every 20 to 30 minutes, someone would go out and spray down that car. The Pennsylvania winter was brutal that year, so each layer of water froze solid before the next person's turn. When Christmas vacation came, most of us went home, but we had help from a couple kids in our classes who lived close enough to bike over to the school. One guy was so dedicated that he showed up with a lawn chair and a book. He just sat there reading and spraying the car every time the previous layer froze solid. Since there was no staff in any of the buildings during vacation, nobody caught him. The night we got back from Christmas break, I was on hose duty with another guy around 2 in the morning. We thought we were being super sneaky, but then the monitor who was working that night came outside. We had no idea he was a smoker, so we figured he was in the office at the other end of the building. I was standing there with the pliers in my hand, totally busted. He looked at me and asked if I had forgotten something. Then he held out the actual spigot key. That's when we realized just how much everyone hated this jerk. This monitor wasn't going to bust us. He was offering to help. He told us he could take care of spraying the car during the day while we were in classes. We couldn't believe it. Even the staff wanted to get back at this guy. By the time the jerk returned at the end of January, his car looked like something out of a science fiction movie. It was completely encased in a solid block of ice that had to be at least 3 inches thick in some places. You couldn't even tell what color the car was supposed to be. When he found his car, he went straight to the administrators to complain, but they had the perfect response ready. They told him that since he never dropped off the keys like he was supposed to, they assumed he changed his mind about leaving the car there. The jerk couldn't argue with that logic. He had messed up by not following the one rule they gave him. Watching him try to get his car out was better than any television show. He couldn't just attack the ice with a hammer because that would shatter all the windows and destroy the paint job. He had to melt it off slowly, the same way it went on. First, he tried using a small blowtorch, but he was too impatient. He kept holding the flame right against the ice, which put out the torch. Then he got the bright idea to connect a hose to the dorm's hot water heater. But suddenly, every single hose on campus disappeared. Who needs a garden hose in Pennsylvania in January, right? When he finally found a hose somewhere, the staff told him he could only use the hot water during class hours because we needed it for showers in the morning and evening, plus the dishwasher had to run. The problem was, he had a regular day job Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. Weekends were out because that's when we did laundry. The maintenance guy told him the hot water tank could barely keep up. That became our favorite line to quote to each other. So this guy ended up running back and forth from the kitchen with tea kettles full of hot water. He'd pour the water to melt channels in the ice, then try to chisel out the chunks between them with a screwdriver. Maintenance wouldn't lend him proper tools, and he was too cheap to buy a chisel just for this. We made sure to turn off the burner whenever he left the kitchen unattended. The ice would come off in playing card-sized flakes, but only about a third as thick as a deck of cards. He could only work on it for maybe 10 or 15 minutes in the morning after we left for class, but before he had to go to his day job, and another half hour or so at night after we were supposed to be in bed but before he had to go home to sleep. The car was parked on the north side of the building where it got almost no sun, and we had made sure to freeze it to the ground. Around Valentine's Day, he finally got enough ice off that he could have it towed to a local car wash that could keep it indoors long enough for the rest to melt. He had no friends willing to help him, which wasn't surprising, and he sure wasn't going to trust any of us students to help out. None of us got in trouble, not even a little bit. When the administration asked around, every single staff member vouched for us. One of them had literally given us the spigot key to help with our project. The jerk finished out his contract and quit at the end of June when the school year ended. He couldn't quit early without a good reason, or they would have fired him, and the school didn't want to deal with finding a replacement or paying other monitors overtime to cover his shifts. I started fishing when I was 12, and my dad first took me out to this quiet lake about 30 minutes from town. Back then it was our thing, just me and him every weekend. He taught me how to cast, how to read the water, and most importantly, how to be patient. When he passed away 3 years ago, I kept coming back to the same spot. It wasn't just about catching fish anymore. It was about feeling connected to something bigger than myself. My friends started joining me about 2 years back. We all worked dead-end jobs and needed something to look forward to on weekends. The lake became our escape from everything else going wrong in our lives. We've been coming to this exact spot for so long that we knew every rock, every tree, every good fishing hole. The land was definitely public. I checked the county records myself when some guy tried to run us off last year claiming it was his backyard. It turned out he was just being a jerk. So there I was on this perfect Saturday morning, sitting on my usual fallen log with my tackle box beside me. My friend with a baseball cap was telling this ridiculous story about a bass he claimed jumped right into his boat last month. The guy with a beard was trying to one-up him with an even more unbelievable tale. My friend in the red jacket was actually focused on fishing, which was rare for her since she usually spent more time talking than casting. The water was calm, reflecting the clouds like a mirror. A few ducks paddled by and everything felt peaceful. That's when she appeared. This woman came walking down the path like she owned the place. She was dressed like she was heading to some fancy brunch, complete with shoes that definitely weren't made for walking on dirt trails. Her whole vibe screamed money and attitude. She walked right up to us and started yelling about how we couldn't fish there because it was private property. We all looked at each other with that "here we go again" expression. My friend was a cap who never missed a chance to crack a joke, told her that the only thing private around here was her attitude. She got even more serious and demanded that we leave immediately. I figured I should try to be the reasonable one. I'd dealt with plenty of difficult customers at my retail job, so I knew how to stay calm. I told her that we'd been coming here for years and that this was definitely public land. I even offered to show her the county records if she wanted to see them, but she was already past the point of listening to reason. She started going off about property lines and how kids these days have no respect for anything. She was waving her arms around like she was conducting an invisible orchestra, getting more worked up by the second. Then she said something that made my jaw drop. She announced that if we wouldn't leave, she'd make the fish scatter herself. Before any of us could process what that meant, she took several steps back, got a running start, and launched herself into the air. For a split second, she was suspended over the water like some kind of deranged superhero. Then gravity took over, and she hit the lake with the biggest, most dramatic splash I'd ever seen. Water went everywhere. I mean everywhere. We were sitting a good 15 feet from the shore and we still got soaked. For a moment, nobody moved. Even the ducks seemed confused and paddled away quickly. My friend with the beard was the first to speak. He asked in complete shock if she had just done what we all thought she did. The guy with the cap nodded slowly and confirmed that yes, she really had just jumped into the lake. We might have laughed if what happened next hadn't been so serious. The woman started flailing around in the water and it became obvious, real quick, that she couldn't swim. Like it all, she was going under and coming back up gasping and panicking. My friend in the red jacket dropped her fishing rod and told us that the woman was drowning for real. My heart started pounding. This had gone from annoying to life-threatening in about 10 seconds. I said we had to help her. Without even thinking about it, my two guy friends jumped in. I was right behind them, kicking off my shoes when I hit the water. The lake was deeper than it looked from shore and the woman was already going under when we reached her. My friend with the cap got to her first. He tried to calm her down and told her to stop kicking because they had her. But she was in full panic mode, clawing at him like a drowning cat. She almost took him under with her. It was complete chaos. Between the three of us, we managed to get her back to shore. She was coughing up lake water and shivering like crazy. My friend in the red jacket was already on her phone calling for an ambulance. When we got the woman onto dry ground, I thought about how quickly everything had changed. 1 minute we were having a peaceful morning and the next we were pulling someone out of the lake. My friend with a beard was wringing out his shirt trying to play it cool, but I could tell he was shaken up. He said she was lucky we were there. The guy with the cap was shaking his head. He couldn't understand who would do a cannonball to scare fish when they couldn't even swim. My friend in the red jacket knelt beside the woman and spoke to her, telling her that everything was okay and that she was safe now. The woman was just lying there shivering and whimpering. It was hard to believe this was the same person who'd been screaming at us just minutes earlier. Then I heard the sirens approaching. The EMTs rushed over and started checking her vitals. A police officer got out of his car and walked toward us. That's when things got really interesting. The woman's eyes suddenly focused on us with surprising clarity. She pointed a shaky finger directly at us and accused us of trying to drown her. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The cop, a serious-looking guy in his 40s, started walking our way with that expression cops get when they think they're about to arrest someone. He asked us if it was true that we had pushed her in. We all started talking at once, our words tumbling over each other when we tried to explain what really happened. I told him there was no way we would do that and that she had jumped in herself. My friend with a cap said she was trying to scare the fish. My friend in the red jacket insisted that we had saved her. The cop wasn't looking convinced. He had that "I've heard every excuse in the book" look that made my stomach drop. And just when I thought we were about to be handcuffed, a middle-aged couple from a nearby picnic table walked over. The man told the officer that they had seen everything and that we were telling the truth. He said that woman had jumped in by herself. I could have kissed that guy right then and there. The woman from the couple said she had come walking over, yelling at us, then ran and jumped in the water. She called it the strangest thing they'd ever seen. The cop's expression changed, and he turned back to us with a more neutral look. He said he was going to need everyone's statements. While we were talking to the officer, the paramedics were loading the woman into the ambulance. She kept shooting us dirty looks like we were the villains in some twisted story she'd made up in her head. My friend in the red jacket was getting angrier by the minute. She couldn't believe the woman was acting like this when we had just saved her life. The guy with the cap was back to making jokes, which meant he was feeling better. He said maybe next time she'd think twice before going for a swim. My friend with a beard just shook his head and said it had been a crazy day. When we gave our statements, the cop thanked us for helping and told us we were free to go. We watched the ambulance drive away and the whole thing felt like a bad dream. When we packed up our fishing gear, none of us said much. We were all processing what had just happened. My friend with the cap finally broke the silence. He asked if anyone else was hungry because he was starving after all that excitement. We ended up at a burger place about 10 minutes away, and suddenly everyone was talking at once about what we'd just been through. My friend with a beard took a huge bite of his burger before speaking. He said he thought we were going to get arrested for a minute there. My friend in the red jacket rolled her eyes and said there was no way that would happen since we didn't do anything wrong. The guy with the cap was already posting about it on social media. He said he had to let the world know about our heroic deeds. The next day, we heard through a friend of a friend that the woman had been charged with filing a false police report and public disturbance. Apparently, those witnesses really did save us from a lot of trouble. We met up at the lake again the following weekend, but this time we were a little more cautious. Every time we heard footsteps on the trail, we'd all look up to see who was coming. My friend with a cap cast his line with extra flair. He said he was going to catch the big one that day and that no crazy cannonballs were going to stop him. My friend in the red jacket was sitting with her feet in the water, looking more relaxed than she had all week. She said that, in a weird way, she kind of felt bad for the woman. My friend with the beard snorted and asked how she could feel bad when the woman almost got us in trouble. She shrugged and said that, yeah, the woman was completely nuts, but maybe she was going through some stuff. We spent the rest of the day fishing and joking around, and the drama from the week before slowly became just another wild story to tell. I work as a project manager for a mid-sized tech company, and being on time isn't just important in my line of work, it's everything. Missing a client meeting can mean losing a contract worth thousands of dollars. That's exactly what was at stake on this particular rainy evening in downtown. Our biggest potential client had finally agreed to meet, and I knew this was our shot to land the deal that could change everything for our small team. The weather had been terrible all day, with heavy rain making the streets slick and chaotic. During rush hour in weather like this, getting a taxi becomes nearly impossible unless you plan ahead. That's why I'd booked one through the app 45 minutes earlier, making sure I'd have reliable transportation to the meeting across town. I stood under the awning of my office building, checking my phone repeatedly. The app showed my driver was just 2 minutes away. My presentation materials were tucked safely in my waterproof bag, and I'd rehearsed my pitch so many times I could recite it in my sleep. Everything had to go perfectly. A sleek black taxi pulled up to the curb right on schedule. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I grabbed my bag and stepped out into the drizzle. Finally, something was going according to plan. But just as I reached for the door handle, a woman in a bright red coat came out of nowhere and yanked the door open. I politely told her that I believed the taxi was mine. The woman looked over her shoulder with the most dismissive expression I'd ever seen. Everything about her posture screamed entitlement. She told me it was first come, first serve, and slid into the back seat like she owned the place. I stood there for a moment, rain starting to soak through my jacket, trying to process what had just happened. I explained that I had reserved the taxi and that I had an important meeting to attend. Karen scoffed and rolled her eyes like I was some annoying child asking for candy. She dismissed my meeting as unimportant and told the driver to take her wherever she needed to go. The driver looked genuinely uncomfortable looking between Karen and me through his rearview mirror. He seemed like a decent guy caught in an impossible situation. The driver started to apologize and explain that the ride had indeed been reserved, but Karen cut him off. She insisted that since she was already in the taxi, it was now hers, and told him to start driving. Her voice had this sharp, commanding tone that made my skin crawl. I leaned down toward the open door trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. I told her I didn't want to argue and asked if we could please sort the situation out. That's when everything went completely insane. Karen suddenly lunged at me like some wild animal, her fingernails raking across my forearm. The pain was sharp and immediate. She screamed at me to get away from what she called her taxi. I stumbled backwards, staring at the red scratches on my arm in complete shock. People walking by had started to stop and stare. A few pulled out their phones. I asked her if she was insane and told her she couldn't just assault people. But Karen was just getting started. She called me an entitled brat and insisted the taxi was hers because she saw it first. The sheer irony of her calling me entitled while literally stealing my reserved taxi and scratching me was almost too much to handle. I reminded her that I had reserved the taxi and that it wasn't about who saw it first. A middle-aged man in a business suit who'd been watching the whole thing finally stepped forward. He had the look of someone who'd seen enough workplace drama to recognize crazy when he saw it. The bystander told her she needed to calm down and explained that she couldn't just take someone's taxi and then attack them. Karen whipped around toward him like he'd personally insulted her entire family. She told him to stay out of it and that it was none of his business. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. The scratches on my arm were starting to sting worse, and I could feel my anger building. I announced that I was calling the police and said the whole situation was ridiculous. For just a second, I saw real fear flash across Karen's face. But then that entitled mask slipped right back on. She told me to go ahead and call them, claiming they wouldn't do anything because she had done nothing wrong. The taxi driver had been silent through most of this nightmare, but he finally spoke up. His voice was quiet but steady. The driver mentioned that he had a camera in his car and that everything had been recorded. Now Karen's confidence started to crack. She looked around at all the people staring at her, probably realizing for the first time that this wasn't going to end well for her. She claimed we were all ganging up on her and insisted she was just trying to get a taxi like everyone else. I dialed the emergency line, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. I told the operator that I had been assaulted over a taxi reservation and that the person who attacked me was still there. The police arrived faster than I expected, probably around 8 minutes. 2 officers got out of their patrol car, and Karen's entire attitude shifted like someone had flipped a switch. She told the officers she was thankful they were there and claimed that I had attacked her over the taxi. One of the officers, a woman with tired eyes who looked like she'd heard every sob story in the book, raised an eyebrow. The officer said she'd received a report of assault, but it seemed to be the other way around. The businessman who'd tried to help earlier stepped forward immediately. The bystander told the officer he had seen the whole thing and explained that Karen had assaulted me when I tried to get into my reserved taxi. The taxi driver nodded and pointed to his dashboard. The driver mentioned he had video evidence from his dash cam that clearly showed what had happened. Karen's voice got higher and more desperate. She insisted that we were all lying and asked why she would assault someone over a taxi. The officer looked completely unimpressed. The officer said they would review the footage and told Karen that if her story was true, she had nothing to worry about. When the police reviewed the dash cam footage on the driver's phone, I watched Karen's confidence crumble piece by piece. The video was crystal clear, showing her grabbing the taxi, her refusing to get out, and especially her lunging at me with her clothes out. Karen stammered that she was just stressed and had a terrible day. Her voice had gone from commanding to pleading in about 30 seconds. The officer told her that was no excuse for assaulting someone and said she was under arrest. Watching them put handcuffs on Karen felt like the most satisfying moment of my entire week. She kept protesting and trying to explain herself, but nobody was listening anymore. The police took my statement while the paramedics cleaned up the scratches on my arm. The taxi driver apologized for the whole situation. The driver said he was really sorry about everything and offered to take me to my destination free of charge. I made it to my meeting 20 minutes late, but the client was understanding when I explained what happened. We got the contract, and Karen ended up facing charges for assault and public disturbance. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.